When I turned 70, I noticed something profound. Change doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. It's not the big moments, the health scares, the losses, the obvious milestones that reshape our lives the most. It's the quiet transformations that slip into our daily routines, so gradually we barely notice them happening. Last month, I visited my neighbor, Dorothy. She's 72, a retired elementary school teacher who used to fill her evenings with book clubs, garden society meetings, and long neighborhood walks. Now I often see her sitting on her front porch with a cup of tea, watching the world go by. At first glance, you might think she's slowing down, maybe even feeling lonely. But when we talked, I discovered something entirely different. "I don't talk as much anymore," she told me, settling back in her chair. "But I listen, really listen. The birds in my maple tree have entire conversations I never heard before. The wind through the leaves tells stories I missed for 70 years. That's when it hit me. Dorothy wasn't withdrawing from life. She was discovering a different way of being present in it. And she wasn't alone in this experience. Today, I want to share 7 changes that happen after 65 that most of us experience, but rarely discuss openly. These aren't losses or signs of decline. They're transformations, shifts in how we experience and engage with the world around us. Understanding these changes can help us navigate this chapter of life with more grace, acceptance, and even appreciation for what this season offers. The first change surprised me most of all because I initially fought against it. In my 40s and 50s, time felt like a river rushing toward the ocean. There were career deadlines, children's activities, social obligations, and an endless list of tasks that never seemed to get shorter. I lived by my planner, scheduled everything in 15-minute blocks, and always felt behind. Somewhere in my late 60s, time began flowing differently. Not slower, exactly, but deeper. Minutes stretched out, allowing me to notice things I'd overlooked for decades. Dorothy explained it perfectly. "I used to gulp down my morning coffee while reading the news and planning my day. Now I sit with that cup for 20 minutes, feeling the warmth, tasting the flavors, watching steam rise in the morning light. People might call it wasting time. I call it the best part of my day." This shift initially worried me. Was I becoming lazy? Had I lost my drive? But gradually, I realized something beautiful was happening. I was learning to inhabit moments instead of just rushing through them. This change in time perception isn't about having less energy or fewer responsibilities. It's about developing a different relationship with presence itself. When you've lived long enough to understand that life moves in seasons, you naturally begin to appreciate the season you're in rather than constantly anticipating the next one. If you've noticed yourself moving more slowly through daily routines, taking longer to make decisions, or feeling less urgency about things that once demanded immediate attention, you're not falling behind. You're falling into a more mindful way of being. Throughout our younger years, we tend to collect relationships, work colleagues, neighborhood acquaintances, family friends, people we meet through various activities and interests. Our social calendars fill up, and we pride ourselves on being well-connected, popular, engaged. After 65, something interesting happens. That wide circle begins to narrow, not because we become antisocial, but because we start choosing depth over breadth. Dorothy's social life illustrates this beautifully. I used to try to maintain friendships with everyone I'd ever met. Holiday card lists with hundreds of names, birthday parties where I barely knew half the guests. Now, I have coffee with 3 close friends regularly, and those conversations are richer than all those surface-level interactions combined. This contraction isn't about losing social skills or becoming isolated. It's about energy conservation and quality connection. We begin to understand that meaningful relationships require investment, and we'd rather water a few plants deeply than sprinkle attention across a vast garden. This shift can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you've defined yourself as a social person. You might worry that people will think you're becoming reclusive or unfriendly. But what's actually happening is a refinement of social energy, focusing on relationships that truly nourish you, rather than maintaining connections out of obligation. If you find yourself declining invitations you would have automatically accepted before, or if you prefer intimate gatherings over large parties, trust this instinct. It's not antisocial behavior. It's the wisdom of understanding what kinds of connections serve your well-being at this stage of life. Here's something no one prepares you for. Your energy doesn't just decrease after 65, it reorganizes itself. The steady, all-day stamina of younger years transforms into something more like natural rhythms, peaks and valleys that, once you understand them, can actually make you more effective. Dorothy discovered her energy pattern by accident. I used to force myself to be productive all day, fighting through afternoon sluggishness with coffee and willpower. Now, I work with my natural rhythms. My brain is sharpest from 6 to 10 in the morning, so that's when I tackle anything important. Afternoons are for gentle activities, reading, light housework, phone calls with family. This isn't about becoming weak or losing vitality. It's about becoming strategic with the energy you have. Many people discover they can accomplish more by working with their natural rhythms than they ever did by fighting against them. The key insight here is that rest isn't the opposite of productivity. It's part of an effective energy management system. When you honor your body's natural ebb and flow, you often find yourself more focused and capable during your peak hours. Understanding this change prevents the frustration and self-judgment that comes from comparing your 65-year-old energy to what you remember from your 40s. Different doesn't mean diminished. It means requiring a different approach. Perhaps the most liberating change that happens after 65 is the sudden clarity about what truly matters. The fog of obligation, expectation, and social pressure begins to lift, revealing a surprisingly clear view of your actual values and desires. For most of our adult lives, we say yes to things we don't want to do, maintain relationships that drain us, and pursue goals that don't align with our authentic selves. We do this because we're building careers, raising families, establishing ourselves in communities. Much of this is necessary and valuable, but it can obscure our true preferences. Dorothy experienced this clarity dramatically. Last year, I was still serving on 3 volunteer committees because I'd always served on committees. Then one day, I realized I was doing it out of habit, not passion. I resigned from 2 and threw myself fully into the literacy program that actually excited me. For the first time in years, I looked forward to my volunteer work instead of enduring it. This isn't about becoming selfish or irresponsible. It's about having enough life experience to distinguish between what you think you should want and what you actually want. After decades of juggling multiple priorities, you develop the wisdom to identify what deserves your limited time and energy. This clarity can feel almost revolutionary. Suddenly, you have permission to disappoint people whose approval you've been seeking for years. You can decline invitations without elaborate excuses. You can pursue interests that bring you joy, even if others don't understand their value. The freedom that comes with this change is one of the unexpected gifts of aging. You're finally old enough to stop pretending to be someone you're not. One of the most fascinating neurological changes after 65 is the way memory reorganizes itself. You might struggle to remember where you put your reading glasses this morning, but you can recall conversations from high school with startling detail. Dorothy laughed about this phenomenon. Yesterday, I spent 10 minutes looking for my car keys, only to find them in my hand. But last week, I suddenly remembered the exact words my third-grade teacher said when she praised a story I'd written. I could smell the chalk dust, see the afternoon sunlight slanting through the windows, feel the pride swelling in my 8-year-old chest. This isn't simply memory deterioration, it's memory prioritization. Your brain seems to understand that recent, mundane details matter less than the rich experiences that shaped who you became. Those vivid, distant memories aren't just nostalgia. They're your mind's way of helping you make sense of your life's narrative. These recovered memories often bring unexpected insights. Patterns you couldn't see while living through experiences become clear from the vantage point of years. Conversations that seemed insignificant at the time reveal their profound impact on your choices and beliefs. Rather than viewing memory changes as purely negative, consider them part of a natural shift toward reflection and integration. Your mind is becoming less focused on short-term details and more interested in long-term meaning. Something remarkable happens to aesthetic sensitivity as we age. Colors seem more vibrant. Music moves you more profoundly. A sunset can literally stop you in your tracks in ways it never did when you were rushing through your busy years. Dorothy described this beautifully. Last week, I was walking past Mrs. Johnson's garden when her roses stopped me cold. Not just the sight of them, but the way the light fell across the petals, the subtle fragrance mixing with the evening air, the whole moment. I stood there for 20 minutes, just absorbing it. My younger self would have hurried past, thinking about dinner or tomorrow's schedule. This heightened sensitivity isn't sentimentality or excessive emotionalism. It's the result of having enough life experience to recognize beauty's rarity and value. When you understand that you won't see infinite sunsets or hear infinite symphonies, each one becomes more precious. This change often surprises people. They expect aging to dull their senses, but instead find certain experiences more intense and meaningful than ever. A grandchild's laugh, the taste of homemade bread, the feeling of soft fabric. Simple pleasures carry more weight when you're not distracted by an overwhelming array of competing demands. This deepened appreciation for beauty is one of the compensation mechanisms of aging. While some capacities diminish, others intensify, creating a different but equally rich way of experiencing the world. The final and perhaps most significant change is the emergence of something that can only be called wisdom. Not just accumulated information, but a deeper understanding of how life works, how people operate, and what truly matters. This isn't about becoming smarter in the conventional sense. It's about developing pattern recognition across decades of experience, understanding human nature in ways that only come from observing it across multiple generations and circumstances. Dorothy's teaching background illustrates this perfectly. When I was in the classroom, I thought I was educating children. Now I realize I was learning about human nature. All those students taught me about resilience, creativity, and potential. Now, when I see young people struggling, I recognize patterns I couldn't see at 30. Not to give unwanted advice, but to offer understanding. This wisdom manifests in practical ways: better judgment about people and situations, less reactivity to drama and conflict, deeper empathy for human struggles, and a kind of philosophical perspective that helps weather life's inevitable difficulties. You find yourself less likely to get caught up in petty disputes, more able to see situations from multiple perspectives, and increasingly skilled at distinguishing between problems worth solving and problems that will resolve themselves with time. You develop what I call temporal perspective, the ability to see current difficulties in the context of your entire life experience. It's the difference between knowing that this too shall pass as a saying and understanding it as a lived truth that has proven itself through countless experiences. When you've weathered multiple life storms, you develop confidence in your ability to navigate whatever comes next, bringing it all together. When I consider these 7 changes, the different relationship with time, the natural contraction of social circles, the redistribution of physical energy, the clarity of priorities, the reorganization of memory, the deepened appreciation of beauty, and the emergence of wisdom, I see a pattern. These aren't random effects of aging, they're adaptations. Our minds and bodies are adjusting to a different phase of existence, one focused less on building and accumulating, and more on appreciating and understanding. Think about it this way. Your younger years were about expansion, expanding your knowledge, your network, your experiences, your responsibilities. This phase of life is about refinement, refining what matters, deepening what brings joy, focusing energy where it creates the most meaning. Dorothy's transformation makes perfect sense now. She wasn't withdrawing from life. She was entering a more contemplative, selective, and ultimately satisfying way of engaging with it. Her quieter existence isn't a diminished version of her former self. It's an evolved version, adapted to different circumstances and capabilities. The challenge many of us face is that our culture tends to value expansion over refinement, quantity over quality, speed over depth. This can make the natural changes of aging feel like failures rather than achievements. We're not encouraged to see the beauty in a smaller social circle, the wisdom in moving more slowly, or the value in prioritizing differently. But what if we shifted this perspective? What if we viewed these changes as a kind of life expertise, the natural result of decades spent learning how to live well? The key to navigating this transition successfully is understanding that different doesn't mean lesser. The person you're becoming after 65 has capabilities and perspectives that your younger self lacked. You're not just older, you're also, in many ways, more sophisticated in your approach to living. These changes don't happen overnight, and they don't happen to everyone in exactly the same way. But recognizing them as natural adaptations rather than unwelcome limitations can transform how you experience this phase of life. If you're noticing these shifts in yourself, you're not alone. Millions of us are navigating this same transformation, learning to appreciate what this season of life offers rather than mourning what it's taken away. Dorothy summed it up perfectly during our last conversation. I spent 60 years becoming who I thought I should be, Now I'm finally discovering who I actually am. And you know what? I like her better. What changes have you noticed in yourself since turning 65? Have any of these shifts surprised you or caused you worry? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Sometimes knowing that others are walking the same path makes the journey feel less mysterious and more manageable. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next time, be gentle with yourself as you navigate these changes. They're not signs that you're failing to age gracefully. They're evidence that you're succeeding at adapting to life's natural rhythms.